much for joining us here at Smart Business Power Players. My name is Dean Hammersfield with Great Lakes Integrated. We're proud to be a sponsor of Power Players and a partner with Smart Business, and going through a number of these events with very interesting content from our leaders in our local area, and today I think will prove to be the same. This is our 80th year in business, and during that time we've been able to reach out around the country and get customers from different areas here in the United States. We're actually trying to expand that reach to international right now. But part of the success we've had with our clients in New York, Washington, D.C., Texas, is a strong value proposition. And the value proposition is quality, always, value, and innovation. And those values are part of the culture here in Northern Ohio, for those of us who've grown up here. I was fortunate to have some of those clients from New York and Washington, D.C. come in and visit us over the last month or so. And it's really interesting. Some were in for the first time, some were in, haven't been here for a while. They all had the same experience. What a pleasant surprise it was to be here in Cleveland. Really, really very interesting stuff. I had lunch with an associate of mine from St. Louis last week, and she said, just take me to your favorite restaurant. I'm like, well, let's see, she's been here in January, and she was here in February. So she's here in August, so I took her down to the lake and we ate at a place that wasn't necessarily my favorite restaurant, but it was at the lake, and it wasn't in January or February. Most of our friends and customers leave with the same impression, and that's they like Cleveland. There's a lot to do, and people are genuinely nice. And that culture is part of what we pass on to our children. We pass it on through our home lives, through the educational system, through that extended family, through sports, through all those life experiences. Now, a lot of my associates and peers are running through the same thing that we've gone through, that I've gone through, in that our children have grown up, they've learned, they've been educated, and then they got drafted to another state. And they're out there somewhere else working, and it's fun to watch them because they're taking a value set with them that is a little bit unique. My daughter was drafted from Bowling Green State University by BP and went off to Houston about 4 years ago. Now, it's really been interesting because she's done some amazing things down there with her Midwestern values tied into that corporate experience down in big oil country. Actually, it's pretty interesting. She has developed the cutest little Tex Ohio accent you just ever wanted to hear. And she is still a Cleveland sports fan, still an Indians fan, a big-time Browns fan. And she knows more about Cavs than I do. She tells me what's going on. So I was in the military. I travel around quite a bit. And I've always said Cleveland is a great place to be from. Now, I'm looking forward to David Gilbert talking to us today on his quest to make Northern Ohio the place to be for amateur sports. So thanks for your time. I hope at some point we can get together and talk a little bit. If I haven't met you, I'd like to. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Brennan, Chief Marketing Officer from Skylight Financial. Dan?
Good afternoon. How many have been to one of these before? That's good. A lot of new people, too. Have you been here before? I have. He's been here before. He didn't come to the last one. He was promoting a book or something. I can't believe they let you off work to do that stuff. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce David Gilbert today. Can you hear me? Yeah. Dave's president and CEO of the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission, whose goal is to make Greater Cleveland the nation's foremost destination for amateur sporting events and activities. The organization is responsible for attracting, promoting, and managing major amateur athletic events and to create sporting opportunities for youth and amateur athletes. Prior to this position, David served as Director of Community Affairs and Special Projects for the Convention and Visitors Bureau of Greater Cleveland, where he was responsible for advancing Cleveland's travel and tourism services standards and related developments. Highlights of his tenure include funding and developing of 2 full-service visitor information centers and spearheading the funding, creation, and operation of the Spirit of Hospitality career training program which was an innovative new welfare to work initiative that received national recognition and acclaim. Prior to his work with CVD, David also served as executive director of the North Coast Harbor Incorporated, a local development corporation responsible for the master planning and marketing of Cleveland's downtown and lakefront development district. He also held the position of director of corporate development for the Cleveland Playhouse. David's active in the community. He's currently in volunteer positions include the board of Cleveland Jewish News and the International Children's Games. He's also a graduate of the Jewish Community Federation's Mandel Leadership Program and a member of the Leadership Cleveland class of 2001. He's been named one of Cleveland's 40 under 40 by some other publications in town here called Crane's Cleveland Business. Can I say that? Is that like cursing or anything? Okay. He has a bachelor's degree from The Ohio State University and an MBA from Cleveland State. Please welcome David.
Dean, thanks for the introduction as well. Before we jump into this with Dave here, I just want to talk a little bit about the series and thank everybody for joining us here today. You know, this is the third installment of the Smart Business Power Players series presented by Skylight Financial, and it's been a great series so far, and we've got a great way to wrap it up. And just to bring you up to speed, we started with Ari Moran of MRN Limited and discussed downtown development in places like East 4th Street and University Circle, and had fascinating things to talk about that day. Then we sat down with Tom Zenti of the University Hospital Health System. We talked about how healthcare has an enormous economic impact on this region. The next month, actually in October, on the 18th, we're going to conclude the series with Terry Stewart, the CEO of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum, and discuss the entertainment and music industry's role here as well. And I saw on the RSVP list Ivan Schwartz from the Film Commission. Ivan, are you in the room today? If you are, raise your hand. We're going to have to draft you for next year with all the things going on with movies being filmed in this region for next year for this series. But today we're going to delve into the arena of sports and its contribution to the regional economy. And I want to thank our sponsor, Skylight Financial, member of the Mass Mutual Financial Group, Great Lakes Integrated, our team over there, our friends over there, Jim and Dean. And what they're doing with pearls and QR codes is pretty amazing stuff on the cutting edge. We have our friends over at Skoda Minotti, the CPAs, business and financial advisors, Greg and Jonathan. And you guys have been partners with us for many years, and we love your business and hope you continue with us, and really do appreciate it. Our friends at Nemacolin and Woodlands Resort, which is a family and luxury vacation destination that I just learned Paul Fox is taking the team from Skylight Financial to go spend a couple days out there. And then our host here, Sammy's. And we really appreciate them hosting this. As you've been to a couple of these, we've been around in a few of their locations. And October will end at the One Conference Center, which was formerly the Forum, and continue our tour of downtown Cleveland and its wonderful facilities. And then last but not least, we want to thank our friends over at Positively Cleveland, which is an award-winning destination marketing organization promoting Cleveland. That's the other hat that David wears, if you heard that. As many of you know, we did have Len Komorowski, the president of the Cavaliers and Quicken Loans Arena, scheduled for today. Due to the NBA lockout and a gag order by the judge in which they are fining NBA teams and owners $1 million per incident for talking in public, Len unfortunately didn't think we were worth $1 million for the man's pocket. So he has promised that he would do something for us at a later time, so we will have Len Komorowski either later this year or in 2012. But we have an amazing stand-in in Dave here. And we're going to broaden the topic beyond just the Cavaliers from one sports team and talk really about this region as a whole. And Dave, in your role as a Greater Cleveland Sports Commissioner over the past decade plus, let's start with the big three, their impact on the economy. The Cavs, the Indians, the Browns, excluding preseason or playoff games. Respectively, the Cavs played 41 home games, the Indians 81, and the Browns 8. So what does that do for the region to bring that kind of in for those games?
Thanks. One, if anyone wanted to leave now because they were expecting Len, I won't take any offense. There haven't been, to my knowledge, any definitive studies that would say this is exactly what a Browns season means or a Cavs season means to the community. But it's very clear that certainly on the economic side, these teams each mean tens and tens of millions of dollars to the local economy. Ultimately, there's a lot of great things about having the teams. Certainly national visibility, quality of life. The kind of things we take a close look at is how they impact the travel and tourism industry and how they impact the economy. And what most economists will tell you is someone coming from Lakewood or someone coming from Westlake or Solon to come down to an Indians game, Browns game, Cavs game really is neutral for the economy. It's great for downtown. I mean, and large majorities of the people will come down and have a meal before and so on. But most economists say if they didn't spend their money on that Indians ticket, they would have spent it on a movie or something, something other entertainment related. But the bottom line is that a significant portion of people going to any of those sporting events are from outside the region, whether they drive in from Mansfield or whether they drive in from the city of the opposing team. In fact, the Cavs, the last year of LeBron, they had done a study. It was pretty interesting. Over 20% of every ticket buyer, I don't think I'd get gagged for $1 million if I talk about that. So,
I think you're pretty safe.
Over 20% of every non-season ticket holder, every single game, game ticket that was sold was from outside the region. So if you think, I mean, just in round numbers, if even, and it's probably high, but if 3/4, if 15,000 of the 20,000 people there were season ticket holders, so the other 5,000, at least 1,000 of those were from out of market. So you think for every single Cavs game, at a minimum, 1,000 people were coming into town from outside the market, and they were spending their money to park, for their game tickets, for their food. Many of them stayed over for gas they bought when they were here, on and on and on. And that's what drives the economics. You think about the Browns. While it's only 8 dates a year in the regular season, the Browns backers, largest organized fan club of any sports team in the world, and every single game there are numerous Browns backers clubs just organized that will bring in 20, 30, 40, 100 plus people. And again, if I had to guess, there's probably at least 5,000 to 10,000, if not more, people who come to every Browns game that are from out of market. And in many ways, the same goes for the Indians. So while it's, what we don't have is definitive numbers to say a Browns season means $50 million to the local economy. We do know that in all instances it is in the tens of millions of dollars.
Interesting. And beyond those big three, there are a number of minor league and semi-professional teams. You've got the Thrashers, you've got the Monsters, you've got the Captains. Now, how does that change the dynamics of it? Because you're not going to have those people coming from the Browns backers or those people coming from out of city to see the Detroit Tigers play.
Right. I think there's a couple of things. Certainly in a small way, they do help the economy. I mean, every one of those teams that play, the opposing teams come into town. They stay in, the players, the management, the trainers, they all come into town. They stay in hotels. You'd be very surprised how many teams from visiting, how many players from visiting teams of all sports go to UH, in particular the Cleveland Clinic Sports Health, to get checked up. Overall, the minor league sports are their impact is probably greater on the quality of life in the region than it is economically. But even them, even each of the minor league teams certainly drives some economics to the community.
Interesting. And so you think about the people coming in, but you have these venues. I mean, 3 venues that probably would not exist without the Browns, the Indians, or the Cavs. And yet, combined, you've got 41, 81, and 80. It's not a lot of games with people coming in. And yes, it's millions of dollars of people coming in for those. But what I find fascinating is that these venues themselves create opportunities for other events that are driven initially by sports. I mean, you've got concerts, circuses, other programs. How do they maximize these revenue opportunities, too?
Well, it makes a great point. I think in every one of the cases, particularly looking at Cavs, Indians, and Browns, and each controls their stadium, it's a tremendous asset that they try to utilize. And you hear people all the time talk about a shame that Brown Stadium has 10 dates a year, but they all work very hard to maximize what they have in those assets. And many times those events that come in to use those facilities they're sometimes as big, if not bigger, economic drivers than the teams themselves, or certainly a Browns game, a Cavs game, and Indians game. And you could go across the board. Again, certain events like a circus, I don't know the demographics, probably is largely local, but you have some major concerts. There are people who will drive in from Columbus, from Buffalo, Detroit, Pittsburgh to see when, if an Elton John plays here or somebody else. When you have certainly major sporting events, clearly the kinds of events that bring people in, whether it's the All-Star games. Actually, the Browns just hosted the NFL. Started in conjunction with USA Football, a national 7-on-7 flag football championship, and they held the tournament here in Cleveland. And that event brought in, I forgot the number of teams, but it was I think it was the top 16 teams. So here you had, probably 12, 14 kids on a team, plus their parents and grandparents and the coaches, all coming into town for 4 days of a tournament. And what the Browns offered is you can use the field. And it was a great experience for these kids to play on the field, but that brought in hundreds of people and probably left behind some six-figure amount in the economy when all was said and done.
That's interesting. We take it back a little bit, and we've talked about pro, we've talked about amateur, and I want everybody out there to be thinking about questions you got for David on this topic as we launch into his bread and butter, which is the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission, which over the past decade has had hundreds of millions of dollars worth of economic impact on the region. So talk a little bit about being a host, how you've been able to bring these in, and what they do individually and then combined.
Well, what the organization does is it's an economic development organization, and sporting events are the tool. Primarily what the organization does is compete against other communities for the rights to host major events, NCAA championship events, Olympic sport championship events, gets very involved in the management of those events, and also we're getting in now to owning and operating some events. We have a historically black college classic football game that we're starting. It'll take place September 10th at Brown Stadium. The Sports Commission started, we own, and we weren't waiting for somebody to put out to bid. We're proactive and decided to create it. But these events, so in about 11 and a half years that the organization has been around, we've been directly responsible for, it's now I think 104 events is the total number, and the total economic impact of that is north of $310 million on the local economy. But there are certainly some that people know about, about a U.S. figure skating championships, or the gravity games in Detroit that were here, or the international children's games, NCAA basketball, NCAA women's Final Four. But most of them are the U.S. jump rope world team trials, the U.S. taekwondo junior champion. Not sexy events, but the common denominator in every one of those is they bring people to town to spend their money, so it's while you hear about with the films, you hear about the Avengers, but there's also 3 or 4 other smaller films that you don't hear about, that just like there are smaller events that come in that you may not hear a lot about, but they cause a lot of spending in the community. I think we've really made our mark as an organization in terms of how, because we've actually by most measures become one of the top 3 or 4 sports commissions in the country. And there's a National Association of Sports Commissions, about 250 cities are members, so it's a very competitive industry. Where we've really set the mark in this community is the ability to service these events better than anybody else in the country. We have an infrastructure organizationally to run and manage the events. It's interesting, you think about any one of these, when in most cases other people own these events. Think of all the NCAA championships, all the Olympic sports, and each one of the Olympic governing bodies and the events that they own. They're all businesses. At the end of the day, they are there to serve a purpose. One of those purposes is to make money, another is to bring people into their sport. And what we've really developed is the ability to tell people we can make your business better. We are always selling Cleveland and tremendous venues, the right times of the year, the right kind of weather. It's there's an awful lot to see and do here. I can't tell you the number of our events that utilize the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for an opening ceremony, a closing ceremony. But the sell is also, probably like a lot of your businesses, is how do you make your business better? It's not just come here because we have sunny skies. It's come here because we have an infrastructure where we can, other than the sports. It's funny, the one thing we're sports commissioners, one thing we don't do is run sports. We're not an expert at how to do a swim meet or how to run a judo meet or a track meet. That's what people involved in those sports. USA Track and Field, they're track and field people. Their goal is to get people to the Olympics, and they know track and field. They're not event people. We partner that with a staff that, we have 14 full-time people, and they do marketing, PR, hospitality, ticket sales, event management, everything that the customer would want. And so it really is no different than any other business. How do you try to find out what a customer's needs are and do what you can to make their business better? And thankfully it's gone very well.
Interesting. In typical business, you want to launch a new product or service, you can have mind to market time anywhere from quick to 18 months to, if you're in the pharmaceutical industry, a decade. Talk a little bit about the time mind to market. You mentioned the bidding process, which can be highly competitive, but on the flip side, you talked about owning an event. Why don't you hear it from both sides?
Well, I think in terms of bidding on events, I'd say the average time cycle is probably 18 months. Although we just had someone in last week for a big bowling event that we're looking to attract to town, and it would be here next July. And we have some that we're bidding on at times 5 years plus out. There's actually a lot of it really correlates to the size and scale of the event to the time frame. And then for the organization, the longer lead time makes it easier in terms of the work that has to be done in the management. I'd say 18 months is probably a fairly typical time frame. In terms of creating an event, it's with this classic that we're starting in September, the idea probably came up almost 2 years ago, and I remember the exact conversation with a City of Cleveland councilman. There had been a Black College Classic that had been here in 03 and 05, done by a private promoter for a number of reasons, ceased to exist, and we got asked, would you consider bringing one back? And so, like a lot of business, a lot of due diligence, there's a lot of risk involved, there's a lot of finances. You have to pay the teams and their travel, you pay for the stadium, you pay for the marketing, you have staff time involved in running it. It's probably a $500,000 investment in running and managing the event. And so then you have to think through what do you need from a sponsorship standpoint, a ticket sales standpoint, get your sponsors, media partners together, get board approval, and so on. And so I'd say that was from mind to market probably about 2 years. And that's probably, I guess, a typical time frame. And we have people give us ideas fairly regularly. We sit in staff meetings talking about ideas. And I would guess probably 4 out of 5 times we decide it's something we're not going to pursue. The economics don't work. It may not make sense for the community. Something may already exist. There's too much competition in the market. We don't think we can develop something that's unique enough based on what exists. But I would say it's been we have the kind of board that it's a lot of people in business that understand at times that you have to take some risk to grow. And fortunately, we've developed a business model that affords for some risk and makes it a little bit fun. It's a little bit entrepreneurial, and it's important, probably like any business, to have the leadership, in our case, the board behind what we're doing.
Interesting. During lunch you were talking about 2 upcoming events that you're bringing to town over the next 3 years, and the size and scope of those. Can you go into those 2 and talk about the genesis of them?
Yeah, a lot coming out. I realize in 2013 and 14, Cleveland will host what in both years will likely be the largest sporting events in America. In 2013, an event called the National Senior Games is coming to town. It's held every 2 years. It's basically, and it's marked as the Senior Olympics. The event will have somewhere between 13,000 and 14,000 athletes that will come to town, and based on research, probably about another 20,000 friends and family who will come over a 2-week period. I mean, think about it, it's about the size of the Summer Olympic Games in terms of athletes. And they'll compete in 19 different sports all over the community, and the economic impact of that event is probably going to be roughly in the $40 million range in terms of the dollars that will be spent here during that. that time. And in 2014, the Gay Games, which is held every 4 years, in essence the Gay Olympics, held somewhere around the world. It was last in Cologne, Germany last summer. That'll be held here in 2014 in very comparable numbers, 10 to 12,000 athletes, and what's expected to be 20,000 plus people, friends, family, and others who will come in from around the world for the event. These are, I have to tell you, they're very, very big undertakings. And in both cases, the organization that owns the Gay Games, called the Federation of Gay Games, they have no full-time staff. It's an entirely volunteer board from around the world. And in the case of the National Senior Games, there's only 5 full-time staff, and they really aren't involved in the games themselves. They help manage their membership and the 50 state games around the country. So you think in both of those cases, it falls upon this community to run and manage these events. So it's not as simple as, hey, let's get them here, let's sell them on Cleveland, and when they come, we can wipe our brow and pat ourselves on the back. And it's really, getting them here in many ways with events like that is probably 10% of the work. The other 90% comes once the event is awarded. Now you have to figure out what you do to put it on. And I tell you, in both of those cases, give or take, probably $4 to $5 million has to be raised in cash and in kind. It takes a real infrastructure to do that. It takes a whole infrastructure to run and manage. You're looking at the housing, transportation, sports, entertainment, security. There's so many factors involved. And in both of those cases, we as a community, Sports Commission and others, are involved in getting the people here. So it's not simply, it's not as simple as, if you open up the doors, they'll come. We have to do a lot of marketing so we can make sure instead of 10,000 athletes, we have 14,000. You know, if we're going to throw a party, we want to throw the biggest party. And if we're going to do it, we want to do it right and do what's best for the community. So they're big undertakings, but the other thing, I think that it presents a tremendous opportunity for this community. If we walk away from those doing what we expect to do with those events, and in both cases what we've told the event owners is, our goal is nothing less than that we host the best senior games that's ever happened and the best gay game that's ever happened. And we believe in our head and hearts that we have the ability to do that. And if we do that, Cleveland's standing in not just in the U.S. but in the world as a community that can host the biggest events in the world will continue to help us get events back of that size and caliber.
Interesting. And moving forward, what other kinds of events are you seeing bringing to town? Continuing with Olympic trials, things like that?
Yeah, there's we focus in two specific areas that are we think we've developed the relationships on a bit of a specialty. One is NCAA championships. NCAA had developed a program called a Championship City program about 5 years ago, and they did that in a way to integrate. They're a very siloed type of organization. You have divisions 1, 2, and 3, different sports. They don't really talk to one another. And certainly they don't take advantage of economies of scale. So they created a program to encourage cities to host multiple championships during a period of time that can play off of one another, from a marketing standpoint, a community standpoint, and so on. And we were initially, through a long process, about 40 cities applied, interviewed. We were one of 6. They've now taken it down to 3. So we're one of only 3 cities left in the country that have this championship city designation. And between 2009, 10, 11, and 12, we will host 7 different NCAA championships in Cleveland, more than any other city in the U.S. And we think that will continue. This year we had NCAA basketball first and second round at the Q. We had NCAA women's gymnastics championships that was held at Wolstein Center. Next year NCAA bowling championships will be here, and we expect in 13 and 14 a number of others as well. The other group we've really spent a lot of time on is the Olympic governing bodies. And each Olympic sport has a designated nonprofit organization called an NGB, a national governing body. They are designated by the U.S. Olympic Committee to oversee that sport for the Olympic movement. And we've now hosted at least one national championship in 14 of those Olympic governing bodies in our 11.5 years. We just hosted the U.S. Track and Field Masters Championships about a month ago. That was our first event with USA Track and Field, so we're adding to the stable. And it's just like I was talking about with the senior games and the gay games. It very much is about building a reputation. More often than not now, our leads come directly, instead of us going out and and begging people, which certainly still happens, it happens regularly, we do get calls, say, hey, you hosted our USA Wrestling National Championship, did a great job, would you consider hosting our collegiate championship? And so that's actually helped a great deal, is developing the relationships with individual organizations or with clusters like that. And so I think we'll continue to see some significant Olympic governing body events.
Interesting. Love to take some questions from the audience. If you've got a question, raise your hand and then I'll have you stand up. Go ahead.
I was curious, the great facility out in Geneva, is that part of the sports commission and what you're about? There's a phenomenal facility, how many people know about it?
It's a great question. People didn't hear, out in Geneva, about 45 miles due east of here, right off of I-90, there's a place called Spire Institute that's being built. Some of you may have seen it. It was called Great for a little while. They just changed the name to Spire. It will be, bar none, it already is one of the finest sports facilities in the world. There's a gentleman by the name of Ron Clutter, a businessman who created a nonprofit. He's from Geneva, and it was his dream to have this out there. And they've already spent over $60 million, and there's a lot more underway. In fact, they're going to have a grand opening later this month for their new aquatics facility, which will have 5 different pools. And I'd say their track facility is many people say now, is the finest indoor and outdoor track facility in the world. We're hosting the NCAA men's and women's championship there and some others. But I'll tell you this, it's very interesting. It is a phenomenal facility, and we work, Ron Clutter is on our board, and we work very closely with them. But it's a little bit of a quandary. In some cases, the facility is phenomenal, and events will very naturally fit out there. In some cases, the one difficult part is it's a little bit removed from Cleveland. And I mean, it's 45 miles, it's all freeway, but there's not a lot of additional infrastructure. The hotel rooms out there there's not a big cluster out there. There's not yet quite a lot to see and do right there. So we've wrestled a little bit, quite frankly, as an organization in working with them. What kind of policies do we create? Because we think we're a very regional thinking organization. And we host a big USA Wrestling event every year in Akron because the field house at the University of Akron is the perfect fit for that event. And we really look for where something fits the best. More often than not, it's right here in downtown because of the facilities, the hotels, the amenities. But there are times where you can look at an event like the U.S. Masters Track and Field Championships. It very easily could have been out there, but we held it at Baldwin Wallace. Now we bid on the event prior to Spire opening, but an event like that comes around again. It's phenomenal. It will bring a lot of new events to town. The Big Ten, they're hosting, as I mentioned, their men's and women outdoor track and field championships there in 13 and 14. The reason they chose it is it's the only track facility in the country that can host both men and women simultaneously. It has that many lanes. It has double of everything. Twice the number of jumping pits and throwing lanes, everything you need. So that event would not be in Northeast Ohio otherwise. But there's going to be others that could fit at Spire at their pool, or it could fit at Cleveland State. So I will tell you, it's phenomenal. It's here, but I think many of us are still wrestling with and will for a long time. Where does the facility best fit within the context of all the facilities we have in the community?
Now, out there is mostly nurseries and farms, and I was thinking about the exit on Heisley that's out there, and it suddenly became so built up. I think it was the old diamond area, where you now have motels and hotels. I mean, I'm wondering if that's going to have to be part of their business plan, because there's nothing out there.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. It is absolutely part of their plan. They are actively seeking a hotel operator to build a hotel, and if any of you ever drive up Erie or drive up 90 through Erie, there's a right near the Erie exits. You get this area of 5 or 6 limited service hotels altogether, and those are there because there was a church who built a complex called Family First, this huge soccer complex of, 10 or 12 fields. And they started hosting many, many, many tournaments and events, and those hotels sprouted up because this Family First opened. So you could absolutely see that happening. But I'll tell you one interesting thing, part of the business plan with Spire is they've brought in some of the top people in the country, some of the top former IMG folks from Cleveland, the guy who ran the IMG Academies down in Bradenton, Florida, and they are going to be building dorms. And part of their business model is they're not going to survive on weekend tournaments and a soccer club coming to use the indoor facility for an hour for practice. They want to build. They're going to build a residential facility, and they're taking some less traditional sports like track and field, lacrosse that don't have academies anywhere in the country, and they are going to build residential sports campuses there. So Michael Johnson, for instance, the famous track athlete, he's already put his name on the track facility. And so it'll be the Michael Johnson Track Academy. And they're going to attract kids from all over the country who are aspiring, especially to get college scholarships or run in the Olympics, to live there. They just cut a deal with the Geneva School. I don't even know if this has been announced. I think it was. So, but they've cut a deal with the Geneva schools where the academy kids will they will have use of the schools after hours. So they were thinking of building a school. Instead of building a school, they're going to use the Geneva schools, which Geneva High School 1 mile away, and those kids will do their classroom work after the Geneva kids have left. And the quid pro quo is they're building, instead of right at Spire 1 mile away, they're going to build 10 to 12 outdoor soccer fields and baseball fields using the Geneva High School property. So it's an absolute win-win. But the good news, I think they're thinking much bigger and broader in terms of their business model for how they really make the place work financially.
Next question. Yeah.
On the two big games, seniors and gay, I mean, there was highly competitive.
Yeah.
What distinguished Cleveland to get those two events?
It's a great question. Dan asked both about the gay games and the senior games and what distinguished Cleveland. A little different in each. The senior games I was closer to, we led the bid process. I have probably a little bit more knowledge to speak to that one first. So there were about 20 cities involved in the bid process, and ultimately it came down to 3. It was Cleveland, Miami, and Birmingham were the 3 finalists for our year. What really distinguished it for us, we think, was 2 things. One was, in every city where that event has been held in the past, and this is more typical for these major events, what happens when they go to a community, a separate, called local organizing committee is formed. A separate new nonprofit is formed, and a director is hired, and you build up a new organization to run and manage the event. In our case, we had, believe it or not, at 14 staff there, we're probably one of the 3 largest sports commissions in the country. Because it's business model of being able to run and manage events. So what we're able to say to them is, you're meeting the people who are going to run your event. And we have an infrastructure behind it. The board of the Sports Commission will, in essence, serve as the board of this event. And the staff you're meeting, who we ran the International Children's Games, we ran the NCAA Women's Final Four out of our office. So that helped a great deal. The other, I think, what really pushed over the edge, and I'll tell you a comment that led to us knowing that, we did something for 2 other events, the International Children's Games in 2004 and the Women's Final Four in 2007, that we did a huge amount of community programming around the event. So for the Women's Final Four, and this was part of our bid for that event, we realized that was the largest, in most people's minds, the largest, most important women's sporting event in America. So we said, it could mean a lot more to the community than just a big basketball tournament. And we ended up, very long story short, creating a whole year-long set of programs called Women Rock. We had 11 different programs that had over 10,000 individuals that were involved in the programs, most who didn't have a ticket to the Women's Final Four. Easy things like we had Billie Jean King come in and speak at the City Club. We had we held this 35th anniversary conference on Title IX, biggest conference on Title IX since its founding, and so really all kinds of partners around the community. And what was interesting was the NCAA. 4 months after our event, they were bidding out the Women's Final Four for the following 3 years. They added an entire section to their bid book on community programming as a result of what Cleveland did for the event. So when we had the Senior Games folks in town, we spent, the other communities, we found out later, they were there about 2.5 days, 2.5 days showing them facilities and making sure, convincing them that we have the capacity to run the event. That Miami, Birmingham, as we do with Cleveland, the infrastructure's there. When they got off their plane, we had a private room at John Q's. We gave them a presentation, and what we said was, we're going to show you today all about how we can run and manage the event. But the rest of the time, we're going to have you hear about what we plan to do with the event from a programmatic standpoint. And we had the clinic and UH and Metro and Benjamin Rose Institute and all these organizations involved in meeting with them and hosting meetings about how we can make their event better. And that's what we start to do now. In fact, the very first full-time person we hired on the Senior Games was not about sports, was not about fundraising, it was about programs. And we have a huge committee, and it's developing how do we leverage having this event in town. And what we said to them is, it's not only better for Cleveland, but we'll make your event better. The next time you're going to bid out to a city, you can not only talk about how economically that event's great for Minneapolis or your next city, but you could talk about how if you do it like Cleveland did, it'll be that much more valuable. And when we had a press conference to announce the games coming here, their director came to us and said, he said, you know, so that Jerry Maguire line of "you have me at hello," he said, when you guys talked about that in that very first meeting you had, he said, our staff and board walked out saying, we're coming to Cleveland, even before they had gone to Birmingham and Miami, or they had seen our facilities. They said, nobody else has thought like that. And I think in the case of the gay games, in some ways I think it was similar. We were only tangentially involved, but the group who drove the bid process, they did a terrific job of driving the process and showing them that the community could handle it. But what we've heard from the Federation of Gay Games is the three finalists through a long process were Boston, Washington, and Cleveland. And I think what they looked at and what we sold them on quite a bit was the gay games can make a big difference here. If you go to Boston or Washington, which has a much more established LGBT community, it'll be a great event, but it's not going to be transformative. If you come here and the gay games goes, well, it can be transformative for the community. And they really like that idea that in addition to their event having a big economic impact on where it goes, it can really transform a community. So I think in many ways that's become a hallmark of Cleveland's ability to run and manage these major events and do it in a way that adds a great deal of relevance above and beyond just the hotel rooms that it would fill.
Next question.
Staying on those two sets of games, you know, we all want to see something really positive happen with them. Are there ways that the local community leaders can get involved, and what do we have to do that?
Thank you. I appreciate that question. The question is, for those who didn't hear, is there a way for people in the community to get involved in those kinds of initiatives? And the short answer is absolutely. I can tell you that the way we've developed the structure of how the Senior Games is being managed and the Gay Games, the board is now being restructured and being done exactly the same way, is to allow for engagement of the community. So so for instance, with the Senior Games, we're very fortunate. We have 3 chairs of the event: Toby Cosgrove from the Clinic, Beth Mooney from Key Bank, and Jeff Friedman, the CEO of Associated States Realty. I mean, great community leaders. But beyond that, there's about 8 or 10 different committees, and every one of them, our program committee has probably 25 different organizations and people involved. And as we move along with marketing, with events, with every piece of it, people who contact us, we find out what they're interested in and we slot them in so they have an opportunity to get involved and engaged. All the way down to we're going to need 3,000 or 4,000 volunteers just during the times of both of those events. And so I think at almost any level, people are really going to have the opportunity. And it takes so much to get this done. And I will tell you that whether it's ideas, it's across the board of people bring their expertise to the table. And because we take such pride in what we talk about in our office is how do you wrap the community around an event? And we think that I really believe Cleveland does it better than any other place in the country. And so if we're just talking about how do you run the track meet, there's not a lot most people in this room can do. We've got somebody who knows how to run the track meet. But when we want to make those 35,000 people feel special and do the little things right and the little things better than other communities do, so when they walk away they say Cleveland did it better than anybody else, it's what people bring to the table in their ideas and their expertise. And you know, while we have to raise money, there's so many little things, even from an in-kind standpoint, that people, it is amazing what people will come up with to say, you know, I can do this for you, I can help with this, I know somebody here, or I'm just willing to put my time and my ideas. So I think if anybody ever contacts our office at the Sports Commission, there is tremendous opportunity. So thank you for asking.
Excellent. Last question.
Or I've answered every one.
Well, with that then, Dave, let me thank you for giving me the time. Sure. I let you go, I want to thank our event sponsors. I know somebody else to bring up here. Skylight Financial Group, Great Lakes Integrated, Skoda Minotti, Sammy's, Nemacolin Woodlands Resort, of course, our friends at Positively Cleveland. Dan Brennan, I'd like to provide back up here for some closing comments. Dan?
Well, how was it? Okay?
Good.
All right, so you can stay.
Thank you.
I just want to take a quick moment. If you want to know about Skylight Financial Group, go to our website, which is skylightfinancialgroup.com. That's our commercial. Really what I want to talk about today is when we first partnered with Smart Business, I think we shared a frustration that there were a lot of things going on in the city that no one knew about. You know, people who talk about Cleveland are people that have never been here or never been anyplace else, right? So we've heard about billions of dollars of investment, Cleveland being perceived as a very nice place to go, competing with cities like Washington and Boston and Miami and Birmingham, and winning. I think that's a tribute to the people that do it, but more importantly, I think Dave would agree, it's a tribute to everybody who's in this room and not in this room that advocate for our part of the world. So I want to thank you for coming and supporting these events. I would encourage you to make your reservations early for the October 18th, right?
Correct.
Where we'll be recognizing some people that made contributions and hearing from Mr. Stewart. It sells out fast, so don't be left out. Thank you for coming, and safe trips back to you.